All right, gang. Link aggregation is the name of the game. We're talking about being able to bind multiple ports together between our switches and our wireless LAN controllers in order to get more throughput, right? And to avoid that bottleneck of the devices that are connecting through our access points, through our access switches, through our distribution switches, up to the wireless LAN controller, and then back out again of that wireless LAN controller. We want that to be as efficient, as effective as possible. So here's what we can do. We can, of course, configure our connections here with link aggregation. But when we're using a 5760, recognize that we are not using the Air OS, A-I-R-E, I always misspell it, A-I-R-E, Air OS. Nope, not anymore. Instead, what are we using? Using iOS XE, right? The POSIX-based configuration. When we do that, things get a little more open. We get more options. This is a much more robust operating system in terms of configuration tools. So when it comes to link aggregation, what can we do? We can support protocols like PAGP. We can support LACP. It'll dynamically choose that. Can use Ether channel, just turn that on if we want. But we've got all those available to us. We can have multiple groups. So we can have different groups connected to different switches for redundancy or for multiple types of connections as necessary. So there's a lot of options available to us. In terms of what kind of configuration would we use, what does it look like? It's similar to what we saw in the Air OS, but just a little bit different. Let's see if we can squeeze it in here. Okay, so interface, right? 10 gigabit Ethernet 1.1. We would do that for each of our interfaces. Switch port trunk allowed, VLAN 11, 12, 14, whatever we need. Switch port mode trunk. And then channel group 5 mode active. Active is great because it will actually dynamically determine the best protocol to use. So if we can use PAGP, which allows for up to 16 links with 8 of them being specifically in a failover configuration, that'll be an option for us. If we don't support that, then we can use LACP. And again, we can dynamically create those connections. Awesome. Then, in addition to configuring each interface to be associated with the channel group, we have the channel group itself. And so the channel group option that we'll configure there on those interfaces, interface port channel 5 looks very familiar. Switch port trunk allowed, define those VLANs, switch port mode trunk, and if necessary, again, the switch port trunk native command for whatever native VLAN we're using. Again, not required to have that native VLAN when you're working in a for all configurations, but in some configurations it is there. It's generally good to have that management interface using that native VLAN because it's going to allow for more flexibility depending on different types of devices that are establishing tunnels. So it's best practice to go ahead and use that even though it's not required. So slightly different configuration, more options available. Honestly, the biggest change you see is that mode being set to active rather than on, which is what we have to use in the Air OS models.